Have you ever felt like you've been working harder than ever, doing everything right, and you're coming up empty? You're totally drained, and that's because you're working your ass off and there seems to be no results. Or you're feeling like constantly without energy, exhausted, even depressed a bit. Well, you probably haven't considered the place that you're living as being a cause of that. And this is what this video is about. Some of us might have success on paper, but we're feeling really restless within us. And we have a sense of there's something more to life than maybe how hard I'm working, right? And maybe we feel invisible or like unseen in our community or in our environment. I felt this in a few places I've lived around the world. And astrocartography is one of the best tools for understanding why this may be. So in this episode of the Astrocartography podcast with Very Loose, I am going to share with you about why some of these feelings of being drained, of being exhausted, of being tired, burnt out, why they may be happening. And we're going to do this by exploring what some of the planetary energies are like in different locations, how they may signify for you a certain kind of energy pattern, really low energy, really high energy, really scattered energy. And so there's always this background feeling going on that's at work, and it's what the planets are doing in a particular location for us. And this is, something I want to share with you. I'll share a couple maps here, but I want to just share a case study of someone that I worked with who had this really strong Saturn energy in this location. Saturn was on her angle of career, and she was working 60-hour, 70-hour weeks. She was really overwhelmed, and she just wanted to stop working so much. It was actually like a life theme for her. And she had some really challenging, Saturn aspects to the moon, which kind of keeps your emotional body feeling like it's only good enough if it's more like ambitious and more successful out in the world and achieving more, And so that aspect between the moon and Saturn, that challenging aspect, was enhanced on the Saturn line. And that's one of the things you don't see right away when you look at a map. But as we look at a chart, we can understand that there is this aspect going on that's for this person, sometimes painful, heavy, like baggage or luggage. And it got like intensified on that Saturn line. And that's one of the things that we have to be aware of, that, some planets are generally harder to work with our energy, like Saturn. And then if they touch like a very personal planet, like the moon or the sun, it can be, really devastating to our energy on some levels. I had my own experience when I was in India, and I love being in India, and I had a really hard time a lot of the time. And I was on this strong Saturn location in Dharmsala and in parts of Nepal and northern India. And it was both Sun and Saturn energies for me. And that's because I have the Sun and Saturn squaring in my chart. The Sun represents in astrology your life force. And Saturn is, constraint, constriction, a feeling of heaviness or deeper responsibility at times. But limitation. So limitation on energy, constriction on life force, right? And what happened to me there is that's when my gluten intolerance started. But I didn't know that was a thing. This is like 22 years ago. And, and so I was like eating chapatis and like really like, like in India, right? Like there's lots of bready stuff, right? And I had no idea that I was harming myself. But I was laid out at times. Like my stomach was so bloated, I couldn't get out of bed. I distinctly remember that a lot in Nepal, and also in Dharmsala. And, and so, yeah, life force, being constricted by Saturn. If I went back there, I would be really, really attuned to what I needed to feel like really healthy every day, and really work at that and have to put in probably greater effort for that with being on the Saturn line. And this is why we want to know in advance, what's going on in a region, or if we are feeling drained, what are the planets that are causing some of these issues for us? If we talk about some of the other planets, generally, you know, um, there are planets that can give us more energy, and there are planets that can drain us or feel like we're just super heavy or limited in how much we can do, or maybe trying to do too much. So if we look at the sun, usually that's going to be a pretty energizing location. Um, Whatever angle the sun is on, there's the four angles in astrology: the ascendant, the personality, the descendant, the relationship to others or the kinds of people we attract, the angle of career, the midheaven, and that's a professional point of the chart, and then the angle of the home. And so the sun is giving energy in a location, like that's its nature, right? To give us life. But it just depends on what area it's focusing that vital energy. So usually we're not going to feel as drained, unless, like in my case, I was on a sun line and I have Sun square Saturn, and that was bringing some of that up for me. So then this brings up a very important point, which is, again, what aspects is a planet making, and what house is the planet in? See, in my chart, I have the sun in the 12th house. That's the least energy house of the zodiac. Like, it's internal, it's more meditational, it's more contemplative. Being in India was great for some of that, but in terms of like high energy output, absolutely not. And this is why, again, we can't just say it's one line or one planet, but there are some general things. Um, so the moon line, um, the moon is an emotional planet, and it tells us where our emotions are most drawn, are most sensitized towards, where we're most empathic, impressionable. And so usually that's not going to mean we're going to have a big drain in a location on a moon line, except that we might be emotionally drained. So especially if the moon is on the angle of partnership, we could be drained through relationships there. Like, we're just putting too much emotional energy out towards others that way. It might be towards the career, moon on the angle of career. Okay. So what about Mercury? Well, Mercury lines are where we communicate a lot. There's a lot of exchange going on, networking. Maybe we could burn ourselves out through like trying to scatter our energy too much, you know, and, you know, be too many places all at once. It depends on the configuration of Mercury in your chart, what sign and, planets it's connected to as well. But one planet that can really trigger us is Mars. And, I'll share the screen so you can see my Mars, and I'll show you my Saturn too. Um, and this is going to be just so you could see that you can look this up a little bit on astro.com yourself. I've talked about this in some other videos. And you could see disharmonious aspects, which is really helpful. But I moved all the time when I was living in California after I grew up. When I went to school in Santa Cruz, I moved every 3 months, and I got really bored and sick of that. This was like for like 2 years almost. And Mars, can drain you because you have to just keep being restless and moving around all the time, not feel stable. Um, if we contrast that to Saturn, I was fairly stable actually on my Saturn line in fairly close to where I lived in Denver and Boulder and Evergreen, even down in New Mexico. But the thing was that I got drained from working really damn hard on trying to find a place to live. Saturn just made it hard in the area of home. Like, once I did get it, I stayed longer than I ever stayed somewhere. So that's also Saturn Saturn's about commitment. Saturn's about discipline. He's also known as Kronos, the Lord of Time. And he was there on my angle of the home. So not only did I live in Colorado for a long time, I lived there for over 10 years, but I also lived, in a place longer than I ever had. I even returned to one home on two separate occasions. So there was like an anchor there, and I returned there after travels many times too. So Saturn can definitely anchor us, but it can also exhaust us in, it was just hard. It took me many months, challenges, right? And it wasn't so much about a partnership or about certain career thing. The drain was coming from just the home search. And, you know, it is important to mention that places that, we want to look at the angle of the home, this IC, because that will affect a lot of what's going on internally for us. But also planets on the ascendant have to do directly with our energy, how much energy we feel like we have. Because it's our body, it's our personality. So as a, you know, aside, like I've always loved going to Atlanta where I have Jupiter rising. I even just love flying into that airport. And it's Jupiter. It's like possibilities are here. I feel opportunities, like something joyous. I like the accent. I like how people talk. I don't know. There's like something like that, I even kind of dig that a little bit in Florida. Not that I live there, but I just feel more vital and alive. And just one more, I'll just show you on this other part of the world where I've lived um, last year and the year before. So in 2024, 2025, I have this Neptune line. Now, Neptune is not a planet that gives you a lot of energy typically. It doesn't have to be draining, but it's more like about contemplative life, peaceful life, artistic life, spiritual life. Can be good for retreats. For me, it's been a place I've mostly been by myself, but I've done a lot of artistic work, photography, poetry, music, and that's a big core part of who I am. And so I wouldn't say I was drained, but I was just more focused on what I wanted to create, with my art and music and writing. A planet that can also drain you is Uranus, because you can get too spun out trying to, be doing too many things. Uranus energy is kind of volatile, surprising, eccentric, wild. So there's a lot of changes with Uranus lines. And so that radical kind of what's next, like that can feel really destabilizing and crazy making. So it's not so much like the burnout of Saturn of kind of maybe working too hard or Mars pushing too hard, you know, it's more like a feeling of nervousness or anxiety. So we do have to be careful how close we live to those Uranus lines. And, when it comes to like Pluto, it's not necessarily going to drain you. It's just going to be very intense. And it can be intensely transformative and, change the course of who you are, how you identify, a connection with your soul. But it could be really intense and dramatic and, have to deal with some situations that are really out of your control or like push you to energetic limits. I know I had sleep issues on my Pluto line, so that's pretty draining, right? And I've had that a couple times. So yeah, there's a lot of factors depending on these different planets in a location. And we would say, if you are feeling drained, you feel like you don't have a lot of energy, you're ready to change that story. That's where locational astrology and doing a consultation can be really helpful. So I have a lot more on different planetary lines, Venus lines, Jupiter lines, which we didn't talk about here. Not usually draining. But if you want to check those out, you could see the videos attached to this video. And definitely if you are interested in looking at more high energy locations, places where you can thrive, maybe you want to be leading retreats, maybe you want a place to be a digital nomad and find, community or tribe. Maybe you just want to find love and partnership or go on a really sweet honeymoon, or you want to buy real estate abroad or where you live. Ooh, I definitely want to do locational astrology before doing that. It's a big decision. So this is where we use this incredible tool that I've been blessed to, use in a lot of my travels to 47 countries, and been doing this for 20 years and I love it. So this is another episode of the Astrocartography podcast, sending you a lot of energy, a lot of love, and look forward to speaking more with you in some future episodes. Take care.